Welcome, sleepy traveler. You've arrived at a quiet space made just for you. My name is Valarie, and I am here to guide you gently into rest, to help ease your mind, soften your body, and drift you toward a peaceful, uninterrupted sleep. Whether your day was long or your thoughts feel a little too loud tonight, let this be your permission to slow down, to breathe, and to simply be. There's nothing more to do now. Just allow my voice to be your guide as we begin this gentle journey toward deep, nourishing rest. If you're new here, subscribe for sleep content like this, and like this video if you find it enjoyable. Let's begin. You're here now, and everything else can wait. There is nothing more you need to do. This is your time to rest, to soften, to simply be. Let your body begin to settle, like leaves gently floating to the earth. Allow your shoulders to release any weight they've carried today. Let them sink downward, softened by gravity, soothed by stillness. Notice your breath, where it begins, where it ends. No need to change it, just observe the natural rhythm as it moves through you. Each inhale a gentle invitation to arrive. Each exhale a permission to let go. Let your eyes grow heavier, even if they are already closed. Feel the softness gathering at the edges of your awareness. Tonight there is no hurry. There is only peace. You are safe here. Safe to unwind. Safe to release the day's thoughts like stars flickering out one by one. Let your mind be like a quiet pond, still and silver under moonlight. Any ripples of thought that come are gentle, passing, and brief. You don't need to follow them. Just let them drift by like clouds across a sleepy sky. Let your breath slow a little more now. Inhale slowly through the nose and exhale with a soft sigh through the mouth. Like wind slipping through trees. Breathe in comfort. Breathe out tension. Breathe in ease. Breathe out everything you don't need to carry into sleep. Notice how your body is gently becoming heavier with each breath. Your arms soft and warm. Your hands loose and open. Your back releasing into the surface beneath you. Your legs relaxed like soft ribbon. Your feet no longer needing to move, only to rest. Everything is softening. Everything is slowing. Your breath is now like a lullaby, quiet, steady, and familiar. Let your thoughts fall away like petals from a flower at dusk. There is nothing to solve. There is nothing to fix. Only this moment. Only the hush of now. Let your mind rest in stillness, in silence, in softness. Imagine you're wrapped in a blanket of moonlight, cool and comforting. Or perhaps a soft quilt that smells of lavender and gentle rain. You're being cradled by the night. The stars above are watching, quiet and kind. The world around you is already asleep. And now it's your turn. Let your jaw unclench. Let your forehead smooth. Let your chest rise and fall in an easy rhythm, unhurried. Feel how this rhythm connects you to the slow pulse of the earth below. Even as you lie still, you are part of something vast and loving. You are part of the quiet that lives between each heartbeat. You are held by the stillness that lives beneath every sound. Even your silence is sacred. Even your sleep is a kind of healing. Let yourself drift further now. You may feel yourself floating just slightly as if the bed has become cloud soft. There is nothing to hold on to, nothing to resist, just breath and softness and peace. If any thoughts return, meet them kindly and gently let them go again. They know the way out. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to stop trying. You've done enough for today. You are enough, just as you are in this exact moment. Let the hush of sleep move in around you like fog rolling over quiet hills. Let it settle into your bones, soft and certain. Let the weight of the day melt into the mattress, into the earth. It does not need to follow you into dreams. There is nothing left to carry tonight. Let yourself fall gently into this sacred space of stillness. A space where your body knows how to heal. A space where your heart remembers how to be quiet. You are safe here. You are cared for. You are loved. Let sleep arrive in its own gentle time. Let it take you slowly, softly, sweetly. Like the tide coming to shore. Like petals falling in twilight. You are not alone. The night is keeping you company. You are not lost. You are exactly where you need to be. Your breath is your guide. Follow it like a soft thread through a quiet dream. You've earned this rest. Let it hold you. Let it lull you. Let it carry you all the way to sleep. And as you begin to drift deeper, know that you're safe. Know that you're wrapped in light. Know that you are enough. Let your final thought be a soft one. something like a smile, something like a sigh, something that glows quietly in the dark. You are ready now. So close your eyes, soften your breath. And enjoy tonight's bedtime story. I almost left when my hand touched the doorknob. The metal was cool, and so was the hallway, despite the radiator groaning somewhere in the distance. My reflection in the narrow glass pane looked like a stranger. Hair pulled back too tightly, scarf wrapped like armor, a tin of buttons clutched against my chest as if I could press it hard enough to keep myself from unraveling. The soft murmur of voices drifted from the library's meeting room, a low tide of conversation punctuated by occasional laughter. And then something else. Steam, warmth, the faint smell of chamomile tea. I almost turned back, but I didn't want to go home to the silence. Not tonight. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was warmer than I expected, both in temperature and in feeling. Golden light pooled across the long tables, scattering over scraps of fabric and loops of yarn. Chairs formed a wide circle, and in each one sat a person with busy hands or a ready smile. My entrance made the nearest heads turn. I froze, pulse quickening. "Hello?" A woman with silver curls and round glasses waved me in. "You must be here for the stitching circle." "Yes," I said, my voice rougher than I meant it to be. I think so." "Come sit," she said, patting the empty chair beside her. I slipped into the circle, my coat heavy across my shoulders, the tin of buttons still pressed to my chest. My fingers were stiff from the cold, and for a moment I didn't know what to do with them. Around me, the room moved in its own gentle rhythm, the sound of thread whispering through fabric, mugs clinking softly against saucers, someone laughing under their breath. Introductions began somewhere to my left. A cheerful voice. "I'm Margaret. I knit scarves, mostly. I've been coming for 5 years." Then a young man with paint-flecked hands. "I'm Theo. My aunt dragged me here last month, and now I'm the unofficial button hoarder." He grinned, and I almost smiled. Around the circle they went. Jasmine with the soft voice and careful posture whose quilt was a work in eternal progress. Carla, whose bag overflowed with rainbow yarn. And Daniel, who made elaborate felt animals that looked ready to scurry off the table. When the introductions reached me, I hesitated. My own name felt suddenly heavy. "I'm Margot," I said, eyes on the floor. "I've never sewn anything in my life. I thought I'd try." "That's all it takes," the silver-haired woman said warmly. "I'm Marlene. Start where you are." The table in front of me was scattered with scraps, squares of soft cotton, a faded floral print, the corner of something that might have once been a pillowcase. A small basket held needles and spools of thread in gentle colors, sage, lavender, a warm mustard yellow. Marlene slid a square of pale blue fabric toward me, along with a needle and a spool of white thread. "Start with a simple running stitch," she said, "just up and down like breathing." I unlatched the tin of buttons I'd brought, more out of habit than intention. The collection had been my grandmother's. A small rattle of colors and textures, everything from plain brown discs to mother-of-pearl shimmer. They had sat on my shelf all winter like an unopened conversation. The sight of them now made my throat tighten. My first attempt at threading the needle was clumsy. My hands shook more than I expected, and the thread frayed at the end, refusing to pass cleanly through the tiny silver eye. "Take your time," Marlene murmured. So I did. I breathed in, out, tried again. The thread slid through. A small thing, but it steadied me in a way I hadn't felt in weeks. The room hummed softly around me. Jasmine sat 2 seats over, shoulders curved like mine, her dark hair falling forward as she bent over her quilt square. Every so often she tucked a strand behind her ear, the motion delicate and habitual. Her hands moved slowly but surely, stitching pale green thread into a line of neat little dashes. I forced my own hand to follow suit. Up through the fabric, down, up, down. The first few stitches were uneven, but the world didn't collapse and no one looked over to laugh. When I reached the end of the row, I let out a shaky breath. It wasn't pretty, but it was mine. "First stitch?" Jasmine's voice was quiet but kind. I glanced up, startled that she'd noticed. Her eyes were soft, the kind that looked like they might have known loneliness too. "Yeah," I said. It's messy. She tilted her head toward her own fabric. Mine were too, still are some days. Her words were simple, but something in them loosened the knot in my chest. I smiled, not big, not bright, but real enough that she smiled back. The evening stretched on, measured not in minutes, but in stitches. As the circle talked about gardens and favorite recipes and the best way to patch a hole in a winter coat, I listened. I didn't have stories to add, not yet. But the warmth of their voices filled the room like sunlight, reaching the places in me that had gone cold over the long winter. My fingers grew steadier. The fabric felt less foreign beneath my touch. At some point, I even chose one of my grandmother's buttons, a pale blue one with a tiny chip along the edge, and held it in my palm, imagining where it might belong. It felt like touching memory. By the time Marlene announced that tea was ready, my square of fabric bore a wobbly line of white stitches and a single button anchored near the corner. It wasn't much, but I couldn't stop looking at it. We drifted toward the refreshment table, and someone pressed a warm mug into my hands. Chamomile. The scent rose like a small kindness. I sipped slowly, letting the warmth travel through me. Jasmine hovered nearby, holding her own mug with both hands. For a moment, our eyes met. "I like your button," she said softly. "Thanks," I said. My smile this time came easier. It was my grandmother's. Her gaze lingered for a beat, like she understood that it meant more than just a button. When the evening ended, I packed my fabric and needle into the tin with the rest of the buttons. The room emptied slowly, chairs scraping, laughter echoing down the quiet library hall. I hesitated at the door again, the same place I had almost turned back hours ago. But this time the weight in my chest had shifted. Outside the night air was cold, but not as sharp. Street lamps pooled light on the sidewalk, and my breath rose in small clouds. I glanced down at the tin in my hands, imagining the uneven line of stitches inside, and felt a flicker of something I hadn't dared touch in weeks. Steadiness, maybe even hope. I stabbed my finger again. The sting was sharp and immediate, followed by the familiar bead of red. I pressed it against the corner of the fabric square, leaving a tiny dot that would probably stay there forever, a little signature of clumsiness. My stitches were crooked, uneven, hopeless. I stared at the wobbly white thread inching across the soft pink fabric, and resisted the urge to rip it all out and shove it in the bottom of my bag. Everyone else in the circle seemed to have some secret rhythm, their hands moving without hesitation. Needles slipped through fabric with the softest shush, threads pulling into perfect, obedient lines. And here I was, 22, unemployed, unsure, and apparently incapable of sewing a straight line. The library meeting room smelled like chamomile tea and old wood. It was warm, almost too warm, and the soft hum of conversation floated around me. Marlene was telling someone about her cat's habit of stealing yarn balls, and Theo, across the circle, was sorting buttons with the focus of a jeweler. I hunched lower in my chair and focused on my mess of a square. Why had I thought this was a good idea? I'd found the flyer tacked to the library corkboard last week, a cheery pastel ad for the Wednesday night stitching circle. I had almost walked past it, almost talked myself out of calling the number, almost stayed home like every other night since graduation, scrolling aimlessly through social media while my apartment sat in silence. But something about the flyer, maybe the picture of a patchwork quilt or the promise of beginner's welcome, had pulled me in. I'd told myself it would be low stakes, that I could sit quietly in a corner and maybe, just maybe, remember what it felt like to be around people without flinching. Now, in the soft glow of the meeting room, surrounded by laughter and competence, I wasn't so sure. I was on my third crooked stitch when Ellie started talking. Ellie was one of the older women, gray hair in a neat braid down her back, hands calloused in a way that told me she'd been sewing for decades. She held up a faded patchwork quilt square for us to admire, soft yellows and blues stitched together so seamlessly it made my eyes ache with envy. Then she said, "You know, my first quilt was a disaster." The room chuckled politely. "No, really," Ellie said, leaning forward. "I was 15 and I thought I was some prodigy. Cut up my mom's old dresses without asking, sewed the squares together all wrong, and the first time I tried to wash it..." She paused for effect, eyes twinkling. "The whole thing fell apart in the machine. My mom opened it and found what looked like a giant, soggy confetti explosion." Laughter burst around the circle, warm and contagious. Even Theo wiped his eyes, shaking his head. I felt my shoulders drop just a little. I wasn't the only one who made crooked stitches. Maybe I wouldn't always be. "Hey," Nina said softly. She was sitting next to me, a woman in her 30s with kind eyes and a scarf draped casually over her shoulder like she'd been born elegant. "Don't worry about neatness right now. Just focus on feeling the fabric in your hands." I hesitated, the needle poised midair. I don't think I'm very good at this." "Good doesn't matter," she said. "It's about letting yourself be here. Start with the color that feels like home." I blinked at her. "Home?" She gestured toward the pile of thread spools on the low table in the center of the circle. "Pick a color that reminds you of, I don't know, comfort, somewhere you want to rest." I glanced at the rainbow of threads, all soft shades under the warm light. Deep green, lavender, sunflower yellow, the warm brown of soil. And then I saw it, sky blue, the exact shade of the mornings I used to wake up early for in college. when everything felt possible and the world hadn't yet pressed down on me with questions I couldn't answer. I picked it up, rolling it between my fingers. It felt cool and smooth, like a secret I hadn't shared with anyone. "Sky blue," I said quietly. Nina smiled. "There you go." Switching thread felt like a small ritual. I snipped the white away, threaded the blue slowly, and took my first stitch with it. The color glowed against the pink fabric, a soft line like a horizon. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even straight. But for the first time since I'd sat down, I didn't care. I kept going, letting my hand follow the simple rhythm of up and down, in and out. The conversation around the circle rose and fell like waves. Someone asked Theo about his button collection. Ellie offered tips on patching denim. Marlene passed around a plate of sugar cookies shaped like stars. And in the quiet in between, I felt something begin to loosen in my chest. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't plan to. I'd intended to nod politely and pass, keep my inner world folded tight like a fabric square no one could see. But when Ellie turned to me with a gentle, expectant smile and said, "And how are you doing over there?" the words slipped out. "I feel a little lost," I admitted, eyes on the crooked blue stitches in my lap. "I just graduated and everyone keeps asking me what's next, and I don't know. I'm kind of directionless right now, overwhelmed." The words fell into the quiet. I felt my ears heat. No one laughed. No one winced. Instead, Marlene murmured, "We've all been there." Ellie nodded. "Stitches don't start straight, and neither do paths." The circle hummed with small affirmations, and I felt my breath release slowly, like I'd been holding it all winter. By the end of the evening, I had a single square of fabric with a wandering line of sky blue stitches and one lonely star-shaped button. It looked more like a map than a design, and I realized I liked that. When we began to pack up, Margot, quiet Margot with the soft scarf and the tin of buttons, caught my eye from across the room. She gave me a small, understanding smile. I smiled back. Not big, not confident, but real. Walking home, the night air was crisp, and the library windows glowed behind me like a lantern. I thought of the color I'd chosen, the way the thread had moved through my hands, the way the circle had felt like a harbor I hadn't realized I needed. At home, I set the fabric square on my bedside table. It wasn't pretty, but it was mine. I traced the sky blue stitches with my fingertip and whispered to no one in particular, "I think I'll go back next week." For the first time in months, that thought felt like enough. I always arrive first. It started as a habit, but lately it feels like ritual. The library is quieter in the early evening, just after the staff locks the main doors and before the overhead lights buzz awake in the meeting room. I like those few minutes of solitude, the soft thump of my own footsteps, the distant hum of the heater, the way the building smells faintly of paper and lemon cleaner. I push the door to the meeting room open with my hip, arms full of a canvas tote, and inhale the faint scent of last week's chamomile lingering in the carpet. It's mine for now, this space. I set my tote down on the long table and start my routine. Chairs first. I like them in a wide circle so no one feels trapped. Then the table in the center, scattered with our usual offerings. Fabric squares, spools of thread in soft shades, a little dish of sugar cubes, and the tin of tea bags I refill each week. As the kettle begins to hum in the corner, I unfold my own small bundle of fabric. I run my fingers over the patterns, soft florals, faded gingham, tiny stars on pale gray. Some of these squares have been with me for years, waiting for the right project, waiting for the right night, and I smile because tonight feels like it could be one. The first to arrive is always Marlene. She comes in with her scarf trailing and her voice already soft with welcome. "Evening, Ellie," she says, setting down her knitting bag. "Smells like chamomile in here." I nod toward the kettle. "I thought we'd start warm tonight." One by one the others follow. Margot clutching that little tin of buttons as if it carries her whole heart. Jasmine, still shy, but already gravitating toward the sky blue thread she chose last week. Theo, cheerful and restless, somehow always managing to spill buttons across the table before we've even begun. The room fills slowly with voices and movement, the rhythm of our small community reawakening. Tonight's prompt is simple. Favorite fabrics. Marlene starts, holding up a piece of soft yellow cotton. "This one reminds me of my grandmother's apron. She used to bake cinnamon rolls every Saturday, and she always smelled like sugar and yeast." Laughter ripples through the circle. Theo grabs a square of denim. "I like sturdy fabric, stuff that feels like it's going to stick around. I don't trust the flimsy ones yet." Then Jasmine, voice quieter than the hum of the heater. "Sky blue, like mornings before the world wakes up." She doesn't elaborate, but her fingers stroke the fabric as if she's already halfway lost in a memory. When it's my turn, I hesitate. I pick up a square of faded pink flannel. It's soft with age, the edges fraying a little, and as I run my thumb over the fibers, something in my chest shifts. "This one," I say. "It's from an old baby blanket." The words escape before I can swallow them. I feel the pause in the room, a soft inhalation of curiosity, and heat rises to my cheeks. "My daughter's," I add, quieter. She used to fall asleep holding it, right under her chin." For a moment, the memory is sharp enough to make me catch my breath. A small, warm bundle in my arms, the scent of milk and powder, the soft hum of lullabies in a dimly lit room. I blink hard and focus on my needle. The circle moves on, voices soft and easy again, but the pink flannel still rests in my lap, heavier than it should be. We sew. We talk. The night moves in the familiar rhythm of threads sliding and spoons clinking, but my chest feels heavy, like a stone I've been carrying for 3 years. I glance around the circle. They are kind people, but kindness can be hard to accept when it brushes against the raw places. I keep my smile in place. I tell a story about the time I sewed 2 quilt squares together backward and didn't notice until the next morning. The laughter it earns is warm, but inside I'm somewhere else. Somewhere where pink flannel still smells like baby shampoo and safety, and where silence from a grown daughter feels like a locked door I can't find my way through. The evening winds down. Fabric squares are folded, threads are snipped, and chairs squeak across the carpet as people gather their things. One by one they leave with soft goodbyes and promises to return next week. Margot lingers. "Need a hand cleaning up?" she asks, voice gentle. I want to tell her no. I want to be alone with my thoughts and my fabric and the echo of laughter fading into quiet. But her face is open, kind in a way that doesn't demand. "Sure," I say. We move in easy silence at first. She gathers stray spools of thread. I collect the sugar dish and empty mugs. The quiet is almost companionable until it isn't. I don't mean to speak. It just slips out as I'm rinsing the teapot in the tiny library sink. "I haven't heard from my daughter in 3 years. The words hit the porcelain like a dropped stone. Margot doesn't flinch. She doesn't rush to fill the space. She just places a clean mug on the counter and waits. I let the water run for a moment, watching it swirl down the drain. She moved across the country after college. Busy life, new job, new friends, and then nothing. Messages sent into the void. Holidays passed. I don't even know if I said the wrong thing or if she just... I shake my head. Words feel clumsy against the ache. Margot doesn't try to fix it. She doesn't tell me to call again or to let go. She just leans against the counter and lets the quiet hold what I can't. We make a second cup of tea without speaking. The room is nearly empty now, lit only by the soft glow of the hallway light spilling in from under the door. I sit at the table, both hands around the warm mug, and finally allow my shoulders to drop. Margot settles across from me. We sip. We breathe. The silence isn't heavy. It's steady, like the first stitch you make after a long time of dropping the needle. When your hands finally remember how to hold something without letting it go. I don't know how long we sit there, letting the tea grow cooler and the quiet stretch between us like a thread that doesn't need to be cut. I do know that when Margot finally rises and gathers her coat, I feel a little less like I'm carrying the weight alone. "See you next week," she says softly. I nod. When the door closes behind her, I look down at the pink flannel square in my lap. My stitches are small and neat, steady in a way I don't always feel inside. And for the first time in a long while, I whisper to the empty room, "Maybe next week will be lighter." I never thought I'd be sitting in a library, holding a needle like it was some kind of delicate instrument that might snap if I breathed too hard. The room smelled faintly of chamomile and lemon cleaner, the way it always did when I came to pick up my daughter from her weekend reading club. But this time, I wasn't here for her. I was here for me. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Truthfully, I was here for her anyway. She'd come home from school 2 weeks ago with a tiny wobbly patch sewn onto her backpack. A pink heart, crooked and uneven, but glowing with pride. "We did sewing in art class," she said, eyes bright. "I want to learn more. Can we make stuff at home?" And I'd said yes. Of course I'd said yes. I'd said yes to every little thing she asked since her mom left, because saying yes felt like a kind of patch, like I could sew over the holes life had left in us if I just tried hard enough. But that night, sitting on the couch with a needle and thread in hand, I realized I had no idea what I was doing. So now I was here. The circle was already half full when I walked in, clutching the little kit I'd bought at the craft store like a shield. A few heads turned, some nodding politely. "Hi there," said the older woman with the silver hair and soft smile. I remembered her name from the flyer, Marlene. "Welcome. First time?" "Yeah," I said, clearing my throat. I'm, Luis. I'm here to, learn the basics. My daughter's getting into sewing, and I don't want to, I don't know, embarrass myself when I try to help her." Theo grinned from across the table. "Man, I came in here the first time and couldn't even thread the needle. You'll be fine." Some of the tension in my chest eased. I sat down next to Ellie, kind eyes, quiet presence, and fumbled through the little kit. Needles, thread, tiny scissors. I picked a piece of fabric from the pile in the center, a pale yellow square that reminded me of the sun my daughter always drew in the corner of her pictures. The first attempt to thread the needle went about as well as I expected. My hands are big and clumsy, used to gripping a wrench or a hammer, not something this precise. "Try licking the end," Ellie said gently. "Helps keep the fibers together." I followed her advice, and after a few false starts, the thread slid through. A small victory, but it warmed me. The first stitch was ugly. No other word for it. Uneven, jagged, like a toddler had attacked the fabric with determination, but no plan. Theo noticed and gave me a thumbs up anyway. "Perfect," he said. "That's exactly how mine started." Laughter rippled around the table, not mean, not sharp, just soft enough to let me breathe. As my fingers worked, slow and awkward, the conversation in the room unfolded like background music. Margot talked about a new button she'd added to her project. Jasmine whispered something about picking colors that felt like home. And Ellie shared a memory of her grandmother stitching quilt squares by the window. I listened, letting the rhythm of voices and the quiet sound of thread sliding through fabric settle over me. For the first time all week, I didn't feel like I had to perform, to keep every plate spinning in the air. Somewhere in the second row of stitches, the words came out before I could catch them. My wife left 2 years ago. The needle hovered mid-air. My voice sounded louder than I meant, heavier. No one interrupted. I stared at the yellow fabric in my hands, the thread trembling slightly between my fingers. I've been raising my daughter alone. She's 9 now, and I keep trying to get it right, you know? Pack the right lunches, say the right things, do the right everything. But it's hard. I swallowed, the knot in my throat sharp. It's lonely sometimes. The words settled in the circle like a stone dropped in a pond. And then Ellie, quiet as a breath, said, "You're doing something right. She wants to sew with you." Something in my chest cracked open. I blinked hard, eyes stinging in the warm light of the library. No one rushed to fill the silence with pity or advice. They just let me be. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like the weight on my shoulders wasn't only mine. Ellie leaned closer. "What's her favorite flower?" I glanced at her, caught off guard. Daisies. She picks them from the sidewalk cracks in the summer and puts them in a cup by her bed." Ellie smiled. "Then let's make a patch with a daisy. For her. You can give it to her or just keep it in your kit as a reminder. Every stitch will carry her in it." We spent the rest of the evening working on the little flower. Ellie guided my hands without taking over, showing me how to create the petals with careful short stitches and a yellow center that looked like a tiny burst of sunlight. My stitches weren't neat, but they were steady, and something about the repetition felt like mending. Not just fabric, but the frayed edges inside me. The others peeked occasionally, offering quiet encouragement. Theo joked that my daisy looked abstract, and Jasmine said softly, "I think it looks like it's smiling." I chuckled, an actual chuckle, and kept stitching. By the end of the night, I had a small, slightly crooked daisy on a yellow square. It wasn't perfect, but when I looked at it, I saw her, my daughter, grinning with missing front teeth, holding a handful of wildflowers like they were treasures. I tucked the square carefully into my kit, as if it were something fragile and important. When the others began packing up, I lingered, feeling lighter than when I'd arrived. "Thanks," I said to Ellie as we stacked chairs, "for, you know, letting me talk, helping me make that." She gave me a knowing smile. "Sometimes it's not about fixing things. It's about holding them gently while you stitch around the edges." I nodded, the words settling in a place I didn't know needed filling. On the walk home, the night air felt different. Cool, yes, but soft. I thought about my daughter, about showing her the daisy patch, about maybe sitting at the kitchen table this weekend with 2 needles and 2 spools of thread, letting her teach me as much as I taught her. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was failing. I felt like I was mending. The first time I saw the quilt laid out across the library table, I laughed. Not because it was funny exactly. It was beautiful in that awkward, crooked way that only something made by real hands can be. Squares of every color and texture jostled for space. Theo's denim star, Margot's soft pink button patch, Jasmine's sky blue wandering stitches, Ellie's quiet pink flannel. Even Luicia's slightly abstract daisy sat proudly near the center, as if the whole quilt had grown around it like a garden. And then there was my square, blank. It lay there at the edge of the quilt like a held breath, a pause in the story. I'd managed to dodge it for weeks. Whenever someone brought up the idea of a group quilt, a single piece stitched together from all of our lives, I'd smiled and nodded and said something like, "Oh, I'll figure mine out." I didn't figure it out. I'd folded and unfolded a dozen different fabrics at my apartment, tried to picture something that felt like mine, and every time my chest tightened, the fabric would stay blank, the needle untouched. "Still thinking?" Ellie asked me that evening, her voice gentle but curious. "Yep," I said too brightly. "I'm a contemplator." Theo snorted. "That's a fancy word for procrastinator." I grinned at him because that's what I do. Deflect with humor. Make a joke so no one lingers long enough to see the soft spots. It usually works. But tonight, under the warm library lights and the scent of chamomile that clung to every surface, the laughter didn't stick. The truth pulsed quietly under my ribs. I was terrified. I hadn't made anything in years. Not since I walked away from the job that had once defined me. The title, the corner office, the endless hours that made me feel like I was spinning in a wheel I couldn't escape. I told everyone it was burnout, that I needed a break. What I didn't say was that one morning I sat in my car in the parking garage, hands on the steering wheel, and I couldn't make myself go inside. I stayed there for 2 hours, heart pounding, staring at the concrete wall in front of me, thinking, I can't do this anymore. I quit the next day, and then I didn't do anything for months. No work, no hobbies, no creations. Just nothing. The stitching circle had been my first step back toward life, though I hadn't realized it at the time. I'd wandered in one rainy evening, drawn by the smell of tea and the low murmur of voices, and told myself I was only there to try something new. Now, surrounded by these people who had somehow become friends, the blank square in front of me felt heavier than the whole quilt. During our tea break, I wandered over to the counter, filling my mug with hot water and trying to ignore the soft chatter behind me. I felt a presence at my shoulder. Margot. She didn't speak right away, just stood beside me, stirring sugar into her tea. Finally, she said, "You don't have to make it perfect. Just make it yours." I stared into the steam. I don't even know what mine is anymore. Her eyes met mine, soft and knowing. Then start small. I sat back down, the warmth of the tea seeping into my hands. The others had drifted into easy conversation. Luis talking about the daisy patch he'd sewn for his daughter. Jasmine describing the way her stitches felt like little breaths. Theo joking about starting a side business called Crooked But Cute. Their voices wrapped around me like the quilt itself. I reached for a spool of golden thread. I didn't know why I chose it. Maybe because it felt like a piece of sunlight I could hold in my palm. My fingers trembled as I threaded the needle. I took the first stitch. It was just a curve at first, a shaky half circle on the pale cream fabric. Then another. Then tiny rays, uneven but reaching. A sun, small, imperfect but mine. My chest loosened with each stitch, a warmth blooming under my ribs. The fear didn't vanish, but it shifted into something else, something quieter, something that hummed like recognition. I was making something again. By the final meeting of the season, the quilt had come together. We spread it across 3 tables pushed together, the 5 of us standing around like we were in a little chapel of fabric and light. It was uneven. Some stitches wobbled and certain corners didn't quite line up, but it was alive, vibrant with color, memory, and story. Margot's square with her grandmother's button, Jasmine's wandering sky blue line, Ellie's soft flannel, steady and precise, Luis's daisy, blooming with love, and in the corner, my small golden sun, stitched with trembling hands. No one spoke at first. We just stood there, breathing in the quiet hum of our shared work. Then Theo said, "We should name it." "Name it?" Jasmine asked, tilting her head. "Yeah," he said. "Like ships, or pets, or really good quilts." Marlene, who had drifted in to admire our work as she always did, clasped her hands together. "What about the circle quilt?" We all glanced at each other. It was simple, true. A circle of chairs, a circle of stitches. a circle of people who had walked in with frayed edges and walked out, maybe not whole, but mended in small, meaningful ways. "Yes," Ellie said softly, "the circle quilt." We each touched a corner like a quiet ritual before folding it carefully. It would hang in the library for a while, Marlene said, so others could see what community could create. But I think the real quilt was the invisible one, the threads that had stitched between us, quiet and steady, binding strangers into something softer, something like friendship. After the others left, I lingered for a moment. The library was quiet again, the hum of the heater low, the smell of chamomile still in the air. I ran my fingers over the sun on my square, feeling the slight bumps where the golden thread rose against the fabric. It wasn't perfect, neither was I, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt whole enough. When I stepped outside, the winter night was cold and crisp, but the sky was clear. A pale moon hung above the library, and a faint scatter of stars blinked like stitches across the dark. I tucked my hands in my pockets, smiled to myself, and whispered into the night, still growing, still sewing, still here. And that ends tonight's meditation. You're welcome to stay for a bit longer if you like. Have a beautiful night. Until next time.